Bolt fam, we need to have a real talk today because the vibe in Los Angeles has completely flipped. There's a serious injury involving a key piece, a quiet change in Herbert's protection, a huge decision in the backfield, and even a clear sign this roster might explode down the stretch. None of this is simple, and there's a lot happening under the radar. Are you ready to face the truth about what's coming for the Chargers? You're not going to believe what we've got today. So sit back, drop a like, and let's dive straight into it. To start, we need to stare the elephant in the room right in the face. The Chargers situation right now is that classic mix of relief and fear that only this franchise seems capable of delivering. The win over the Raiders was huge. It was mature. It was the kind of win that says this team still believes, but it came with a massive price tag. Justin Herbert left with his left hand seriously banged up, and the first reaction from the fan base was pure instinct. Here we go again. At the same time, the standings, the record, the wild card race, all of that is still very much alive. And that's where things get really tense. Because apparently the diagnosis is tough. Herbert is going to need a surgical procedure on his non-throwing hand, and that alone is enough to send a chill down any fan's spine. But the bigger picture makes it even heavier. The Chargers are 8-4 in a completely packed AFC, with the Broncos pulling away in the division and the Bills and Colts glued to them in the wild card race. Every detail, every snap, every mistake from here on out carries playoff weight. And to make the drama worse, Herbert isn't the only concern. Omarion Hampton, the rookie running back who was supposed to grow into a pillar of this offense, had a setback late in the week and couldn't even get activated against the Raiders. He's been dealing with that foot fracture since week 5. Lost rhythm, lost continuity, and now walks that fine line between coming back too early or staying out too long. Inside the locker room, the feeling is clear. This group is on a tightrope. There's talent, there's a strong record, there's confidence after beating down the Raiders, but everything now depends on how the medical staff handles this week. If Herbert can suit up against the Eagles even after surgery, and if Hampton can finally come back healthy, the season is wide open. If either one of them can't go, the margin for error vanishes. And the truth is, there's another quiet shift happening in this offense that can change everything even more. Bold fam feels it in their bones. This team can't live on what if anymore, with a schedule that is nothing but heavyweights. Eagles, Chiefs, Broncos, Cowboys, Texans. There are no easy games left. The good news is that even in the middle of the injury chaos, this team showed against Las Vegas that it can win a big one with a locked-in defense, a competent ground game, and smart adjustments. The bad news is that one wrong step physically can throw it all in the trash. And weirdly enough, one specific change in Herbert's protection might be exactly the turning point for this entire story. While we're still trying to catch our breath after all this drama around Herbert, there's another detail that almost slipped through the cracks in this win. But honestly, it might have been the exact moment the Chargers season changed direction, because in the middle of the turbulence, the pressure, and the fear of losing their franchise quarterback, a piece emerged that nobody expected to carry this much weight: Jamari Salyer. And what this guy did against the Raiders was, with zero exaggeration, a breath of hope at a moment when everything felt like it was falling apart. Think about it. The Chargers' offensive line turned into a lab experiment the moment Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater went down. Harbaugh tried everything: patchwork, improvising alignments, flipping sides, extra protection, and nothing really held back the storm. Trevor Penning, who was supposed to be the emergency savior, turned into an easy target for criticism after some brutal failures in key moments. The offense kept stalling because Herbert simply didn't have time. No space. Not even one clean second to work inside the pocket. Then suddenly comes the game against Vegas, a game every fan knew was a must-win, the one everyone had circled on the schedule. And Harbaugh makes a quiet move, almost low profile. He puts Jamari Salyer at starting left tackle. Nobody was expecting a miracle. The fan base just wanted him not to get eaten alive by the pass rush. And what happens? The guy delivers exactly what this team hadn't seen in weeks: stability. He wins key reps, keeps the base of the pocket cleaner, and opens the lane on one of the most critical plays of the day. That explosive touchdown run by Kamani Vidal in the third quarter that completely flipped the emotional tempo of the game. Salyer was the one who sealed the edge. He was the one who carved out the space that allowed the offense to finally breathe. That's when the Bolts really took control back. Of course, there is still plenty to fix. Trey Pipkins got worked by Max Crosby. The protection on the right side is still a big problem, and nobody here is saying Salyer turned into Trent Williams overnight. But honestly, if this guy can maintain even 70% of what he showed in that game, that's enough to turn the offensive line from a fatal flaw into a competitive unit. And that's the part that should have Bolt fam fired up. Maybe, just maybe, the Chargers found their quiet turning point in that Sunday afternoon. And while we're still trying to understand the ripple effect of that transformation up front, there's another element that can completely shake up the Chargers' entire offensive plan down the stretch: the possible return of Omarion Hampton. And here, Bolt fam, the conversation gets serious because we're talking about a piece that changes the box count, changes identity, changes tempo, and even changes the way opposing defenses line up against this Los Angeles offense. Hampton hasn't stepped on the field since week 5. And the truth is, when he went down, the offense lost something that no stat really explains well: presence. Hampton isn't just a running back. He's physical, he's patient, he's violent through contact, and more than anything, he's the type of player who forces linebackers to hesitate and take a step back before triggering downhill. When that happens, Herbert gets life, even if it's just one extra heartbeat in the pocket. For weeks, the same questions kept coming up. Is he back this week? Is he close? Is he practicing? And every update was another cold shower. Week 8, still in the walking boot. Week 9, cleared to return but not truly game ready. Week 12, almost activated. And suddenly a setback. That destroyed any sense of stability in the backfield. Now, though, the story feels different. There's a mood inside the building, and among the insiders, that this finally might be the week. Monday Night Football against the Eagles has turned into the real target. Matt Zenitz was the first to drop it. There is real optimism in the hallways, and that kind of wording in the NFL rarely pops up by accident. Hampton's return changes a lot. He put up 314 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns in 5 games, plus over 130 receiving yards. He's not just a between-the-tackles grinder, he's an outlet, he's a pressure release valve, he's volume, rhythm, possession control. And then comes the other side of the debate. What does this do to Kamani Vidal's role? The truth is, that's not a controversy. It's an opportunity. Kamani held it down like a veteran. He just delivered his third 100-yard game against the Raiders. He showed burst, toughness, and vision. He earned respect. And in practical terms, that helps Hampton. Because now Hampton doesn't have to come back and carry the whole offense on his shoulders from snap 1. In the end, the equation is simple. With Herbert coming off surgery, with the offensive line still recalibrating, and with a brutal schedule coming fast, this offense needs Hampton. It needs his power. It needs his presence. If he really does come back in Week 14, the entire conversation about this team's ceiling changes dramatically. And while the fan base tries to balance anxiety and hope with Hampton potentially coming back, there's something that needs to be said without sugarcoating anything. The win over the Raiders wasn't just necessary, it was revealing. Because in those 4/10 quarters, full of mistakes and emotional swings, this team showed exactly the kind of identity that can sustain a real playoff run, even in the middle of an injury crisis. And for a lot of people, that game marked the moment when a few names finally stepped into the spotlight the Bolt fam had been begging for. Let's start with the obvious: Kamani Vidal. The guy simply does not want to give the job back, and you can't pretend that doesn't matter. In a moment when this offense desperately needed balance, he delivered his third 100-yard game, running with authority, patience, and the kind of confidence you don't usually see in a former 6th-round pick. 126 yards and a touchdown that completely shifted the energy of the afternoon. Every carry felt like a message I can carry this offense while you fix everything else. And as if that wasn't enough, the defense produced one of the most symbolic plays of the season. Right after that painful red zone interception from Herbert, the exact kind of play that usually turns into a disaster avalanche for this franchise, what happens? Dante Jackson climbs the ladder, gets a hand on the ball, and Tony Jefferson appears out of nowhere to snag a completely improbable interception. It was one of those plays that shatters the old, "it always goes wrong for the Chargers" storyline. It felt like a message. Not today. Not in this building. Today, this team is not collapsing. Of course, it wasn't all pretty. Herbert played one of his weirdest games of the year. He left hurt, came back limping, threw his 10th interception of the season, way above what we're used to seeing from him. But even so, he pulled 2 touchdown passes out of his hat and kept the offense on its feet when they needed him most. That matters. That carries weight. That screams leadership. And there's another detail you can't ignore. The Chargers never trailed. Not once. Even with mistakes, even with pressure, even with the tension at SoFi Stadium, they dictated the tempo from start to finish. That hadn't happened in weeks. That doesn't happen by accident. The truth is, this Raiders game was a thermometer, and the result says a lot more about what this team can become than most people realize, especially because there's one entire phase of this roster that has started to wake up, and that unit might end up deciding how this story ends. So let's tie it all together, Bolt fam, because what we've seen over these last few days says a lot about who these Chargers really are. Even with Herbert dealing with surgery on his hand, even with uncertainty around Hampton, even with an offensive line held together by tape and grit, this team showed life. It showed a response. It showed an identity. The win over the Raiders revealed pieces growing, players stepping up in a locker room that refuses to go quietly. The question now is simple. Is all of this going to be enough against a brutal stretch of games? Drop your take in the comments, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe to keep this community growing.